afternoon, Beacon. Good to see you guys. I'm James, I'm one of the pastors here, and welcome to week, I believe it's 2 of the Nehemiah series. We're in this series called Pardon Our Appearance, where we're working through the book of Nehemiah. And today we're going to look at how the heart is so important to our faith, and what Nehemiah teaches us about the role of the heart. How many of you know that the heart is central? It's critical to our walk with Jesus. It's everything. The heart is everything. And because it's been a couple weeks since we've been here and looking at Nehemiah, I want to give you a quick recap of what's happening in this book so far. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, it's about 600 years before Jesus is born. And the Jewish people of the southern kingdom, that southern kingdom was called Judah, they have been taken captive by the Babylonian Empire, a foreign power. And this was prophesied about. They knew this was coming, at least those who believe the prophets. And they are being judged for their idolatry. So God is allowing this to happen. And so they're taken to Babylon. It's about a 1,000-mile walk east, not as a crow flies, but through the mountains, and to what is now modern-day Iraq. And that's where Babylon is. And in that time, 70 years goes by. In that time, the Persian Empire conquered the Babylonian Empire. And so now the Persians inherit the Jewish exiles. And there is this Persian king. Anyone want to guess his name? You guys know the story? Cyrus. Yeah, it's King Cyrus. He's the Persian king. And God moves his heart in a really miraculous way to allow the Jewish people to return to Jerusalem, back to their homeland, to rebuild their city and their temple, and to re-engage in worship. And this is where Nehemiah comes into the picture. Nehemiah is also a Jew, but he was born, it seems, in the land of Persia. And there he is a cupbearer for the Persian king. He's a trusted advisor. He's the guy that tastes everything before it gets to the king. And so he is hearing about all this news about Jerusalem, and he hears one day that the walls of Jerusalem are down. They're somehow down, and he is completely heartbroken because he knows what broken walls mean for the city back then. It means that they could be attacked and that his people, the people of his blood, are now vulnerable to the enemy. And Nehemiah, though he's an advisor to the Persian king, he's allowed to leave the king's service and lead his people to lead the rebuilding efforts of the wall specifically. And from the very beginning of Nehemiah, you see this, that the people, they don't have much. They're without resources or direction. But God moves this Persian king's heart, Artaxerxes, and Nehemiah is given timber, he's given military support, he's given letters of passage, and he's given permission to go back. And in Jerusalem now, Nehemiah gathers the people, he organizes them with incredible leadership, and they begin to build the walls despite opposition, despite great enemy opposition. And within 52 days, they have a fortified city. The walls are back up. And the surrounding enemies are in disbelief. They cannot believe what they've just witnessed. And everyone senses God's power and presence with them. And the book of Nehemiah, it's 13 chapters long. For the first 12 chapters in the book, everything is moving in one direction. It's up and to the right. Even with the opposition, even with some of the work that they're doing with their own hearts, everything is moving up and to the right for 12 chapters. But then in the final chapter, in the 13th chapter of Nehemiah, it suddenly all falls apart. And I want you to see this in the text because it's such a sudden shift. It's such a sudden shift. Here's the scene right before the wheels come off in Nehemiah 12. They've just finished rebuilding the walls, and now they're having a day of dedication and celebration. This is what it says. Many sacrifices were offered on that joyous day. It's a good day, right? They just built the wall. For God had given the people cause for great joy. The women and the children also participated in the celebration, and the joy of the people of Jerusalem could be heard far away. For all the people of Judah took joy in the priests and the Levites and their work. They performed the service of their God and the service of purification as commanded by David and his son Solomon, and so did the singers and the gatekeepers. Now that's how Nehemiah 12 ends. And then we roll right into Nehemiah 13, the final chapter of Nehemiah, and this is what we see. Sometime later, that is Nehemiah, asked that's the king of Persia, permission and came back to Jerusalem. So Nehemiah, it looks like he had taken some time off, went back to Persia to take care of some things, and now he's back in Jerusalem. I also learned that the portions assigned to the Levites had not been given to them. So now he's discovering things back in Jerusalem. And that all the Levites and musicians responsible for the service had gone back to their own fields. So I rebuked the officials and asked them, why is the house of God neglected? The temple, that is. Why is the temple neglected? In those days, I saw people in Judah treading wine presses on the Sabbath and bringing in grain, wine, grapes, figs, and all other kinds of loads. I rebuked the nobles of Judah and said to them, what is this wicked thing you are doing? So not only are they neglecting the temple, now they're working on the Sabbath. And then it goes on, verse 23. Moreover, in those days I saw men of Judah who had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. I rebuked them and called curses down on them. I beat some of the men and pulled out their hair. This guy's got anger issues. I made them take an oath in God's name and said, you are not to give your daughters in marriage to their sons, nor are you to take their daughters in marriage for your sons or for yourselves. And then watch this, Nehemiah's now frantic. He's like, so I purified the priests and the Levites of everything foreign, and I assigned them duties, each to his own task. I also made provision for the contributions of wood at designated times and for the first fruits. Remember me with favor, my God. And that's literally how the book ends. That's the last word. You guys know the movie Apollo 13? You guys seen it? Show of hands. Great movie. It's the real life story. I think it was from 20 years ago, but it's the real life story of 3 astronauts on a spacecraft called the Apollo 13. And while in space, they get hit with some space debris and they lose a bunch of their major life support systems. And now they are in a race to get back to Earth before they die. And NASA engineers back in Houston, they have all the stuff they have on the spacecraft, and they're trying to design a makeshift life support system so that out of spare parts so that these astronauts can get back home. And you might remember that famous line, for those of you who've seen the movie, there's that engineer, he's holding up 2 pieces of equipment in front of a table of more equipment. He's like, he goes to the team, he's like, you've got to take this to fit into this using nothing but that. You guys remember that line? It's a classic line. It's a great line, great movie. It's probably the best build it to survive movie that's ever been made. That should be a category in its own. Well, Nehemiah 13 is like Apollo 13. Miraculously, somehow, they've built the walls, they've rebuilt the priesthood, they've rebuilt the temple. And they're coming back into earth, surviving the atmosphere, surviving the enemies, landing on the water, celebrating just for the spacecraft to hit the water and then begin to sink into the ocean. And down it goes. All you see are bubbles out of sight. And the credits roll. That's literally Nehemiah 13. It's like, what? What just happened? The building project, ultimately, it didn't work. The people fall back into old patterns of sin and rebellion. And the question is, why? Why didn't it work? We were going up and to the right for so long. Why were the reforms insufficient? And here's what I think the answer is. It's because they were trying to fix an inside problem with outside solutions. They were trying to fix inside problems with outside solutions. Nehemiah 13 ends with this short but desperate prayer from Nehemiah. And he says remember at the very end, he's like, remember me with favor, my God. It's like this, almost like this desperate plea, it's not my fault, but he knows. He was part of it. What he's saying is, I tried, God. Remember me, I tried. Oh, how I tried. and yet I failed, and it's an honest prayer, but you can sense the exasperation and the discouragement. And here's the thing, I run into this sentiment quite often as a pastor. Several months ago, I was talking to a neighbor at a local cafe. We just moved, my family and I, and I ran into this person, a neighbor, and spirituality came up, and it usually does when they find out that I'm a pastor. It's like the easiest way to share the gospel. They just ask you what you do. You're like, I'm a pastor. Do you go to church? You know, it's the perfect in. I love it. I love it. There are other things good about being a pastor, but I love that. And so this person, you know, and this happens sometimes, they begin to list almost immediately the ways that they are trying to live a righteous, God-fearing life, and how they're teaching their kids morals and responsibility and citizenship when they find out I'm a pastor. They also apologize for any curses they might have said before they found out I was a pastor. That happens a lot. And then this person says, I'm trying to be a good Christian. And it's all good stuff he's talking about, but the reality is that understanding of Christianity is so far from the truth of the gospel. So far from the truth of the gospel. What he's saying is, I'm trying to be a good person. I'm not a bad person, but I'm trying to be a good person. It's an outside-in spirituality. You guys see that? It's outside-in. External reform, behavior control, rules, regulations, a performed identity. And I hear the faintest whisper of Nehemiah in that, and I'm trying, God. It's, please see me and remember the good. If you think about it, it's also kind of the wider cultural understanding of Christianity, of what it means to be a Christian. And we see this in the church as well, unfortunately. Follow the rules, keep the laws, do good works, be good so that God will bless you, serve. And maybe that's the idea of Christianity that you grew up with, and I know I did. It's an outside-in gospel, which is not really a gospel at all, because gospel means good news. What is an outside-in gospel? It's this. An outside-in gospel says what we do on the outside is what saves us. What we do on the outside, our behavior, our accomplishments, our associations, our achievements, is what saves us. What we do on the outside gives us an identity. And some Christians might say, well, that actually sounds more like the Old Testament God, doesn't it? And I say, really? Does it? Because think about the Israelites in bondage in Egypt, right? 400 years, we know the story. 400 years they're in slavery. And how does God save them? Did he say, well, you're in a pickle, guys? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 613 laws, and I want you to obey them. And if you do a good job, I'll save you. I'll see you in 40 years, see how you do. No, that's not what happens. He hears the cries of desperation, right? The cries of his people. He's moved in his heart, and he rescues them out of bondage first. He rescues them first. And then he leads them to Sinai, where he gives them what amounts to be a marriage contract, because that whole thing was a wedding ceremony, if you didn't know. That whole Mount Sinai thing was a wedding ceremony, which shows us what he wanted from the very beginning. What he always wanted from us more than anything else was not our behavior, but it was our hearts. He wants our hearts. That's the gospel. That story is the gospel in the picture. It's right there in it's the major Old Testament narrative. He's always been after our hearts. And so how strange would it, just thinking about this, how strange would it be to make it real for us if you were to go on like a first date and the thing that you do is not have a meal or talk, but to exchange resumes, You're like, there you go. Oh, really? That's interesting. Some of you are like, I wish I did that, actually. Some of you did do that. Not maybe you, but your parents did that, and you were in an arranged marriage, and literally there was exchanging of CVs. And if that's you, God bless you. I am praying for you in your marriage. It's amazing that you're still together. That's kind of how we treat Christianity. faith and our relationship with God. You know, how do we decide to spend our lives together, you married folk or those of you guys who are dating or engaged? We spend time together. You experience each other, and you feel each other's heart. Not just to find out how many words he can type a minute or how fast she can run or, these minor details. Not that some of these aren't important, but we spend time together to learn each other's heart, to experience each other's heart. And what you find out when you spend time with God, when you spend time with his heart, is that this is a God who's not looking for behavior, but he's looking for our heart. That he saves us from sin and judgment so that we can be set apart for him. But it only works in that order. Because holiness, true holiness, is not an outside-in spirituality. It's inside out. That's true holiness. Because it must involve the heart, a heart that begins to fully trust the one who, as Sarah said before, gave it all for us, who surrendered it all for us. That's the only way that we can trust him with our hearts. And it's the only way to holiness. There was a lot of rules growing up in the church that I grew up in. One rule was not buying on Sunday. Anyone grew up in a church like that? Yeah, a few of us. It's like a southern thing. I don't know why Korean Presbyterian Church in Woodside, Queens would adopt this rule, but nevertheless, it was a rule. You couldn't buy anything on Sundays. And I think the point was to keep you in church and to punish business owners who were not in church. So and I think it kind of worked, but not in the way they had hoped. This rule is born out of a spirit of religion, I believe, which is another way to say outside in religion, outside in spirituality, which repelled me from church. And so by the time I was 13, my church friends and I were sneaking out of church services regularly to go eat at the local diner, to have breakfast. And so some of my fondest memories of church are skipping church. It was incredible because we would go and we would actually kind of have our own church. We would go and share stories and, hey, this is what's happening, and can you believe this? And can you believe he said, that's what it was for us. We shared our lives together. And the point is, the external rules cannot keep a bunch of middle school boys in the seats. They don't work. And throughout Nehemiah, we see external restoration and projects happening. The city walls are restored. The temple is restored. The priesthood is restored. The teaching of the word is restored. There are a lot of practices and structures put into place, like it's almost like scaffolding for a building, except it's to ensure obedience to God and his laws. And yet after all of that, after 12 chapters of that, in the very last chapter of Nehemiah, we see that the people fall back into sin again. All the external structures, in other words, it was not enough to keep the people up and out of sin. And by chapter 13, they're no longer keeping the Sabbath. They no longer support the priesthood or the priests in the temple. They break the laws of intermarriage. Nehemiah comes back from Persia. He went away for a little bit, right? He comes back. He sees their hearts are far from God. The scholars, this is how wild chapter 13 is. The scholars, they don't know what to do with this in large part because it's so jarring. Like a lot of the more liberal scholars, they'll say, well, actually 13 probably came before 12. Some of them will literally take it and move it like this because it doesn't fit at the end. They'll move it around. Except when you look into the structure of chapter 13, you find something kind of interesting. And you see that it's actually quite intentional what Nehemiah is doing here. And I want us to take a look at it. I'm going to back up to chapter 10 first, just to see what's happening. In chapter 10, the people take 3 oaths. Okay? The first oath is no intermarriage. The second oath, I think it was keep the Sabbath. And then the third oath they take as a people together, support the temple and the priest. They take 3 oaths in that particular order. Okay? That's chapter 10. Chapter 13 now, where everything falls apart, right? This is what Nehemiah says about the people. This is how they broke the covenant. The first covenant they break is They neglect the temple and the priests. The second one they break is Sabbath breaking. And then the third is they marry outside their people. And this is what the scholars call a structured literary unraveling. You guys see why that is? It's intentionally symmetrical, but it's flipped. It's like you built it like this, and then it comes off like exactly in the reverse order. And the question is, what's the point? Why did Nehemiah do this? What's Nehemiah getting at here? He's saying this. He's saying external reform cannot transform the human heart. It can't. But there must be one who can. Because if Nehemiah were a movie, chapter 13 is a cliffhanger. And he's saying, it can't end like this, guys. You know and I know it can't end like this. It cannot end like this. And so he, in his own humble way, saying, I failed, but there has to be something more. There's more to the story. There has to be more to the story. And of course there is. 150 years before Nehemiah, there's a guy named Ezekiel. He's a crazy prophet. He saw crazy things. And this is what he says in 36, Ezekiel 36. He says, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. He's speaking for the Lord. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. Nehemiah is intentionally highlighting the failures of the reforms. What he is doing, and quite humbly I would say, is pointing us to a better way. He's not doing this part, the symmetry for fun. He's saying, I know what happened. There's a better way. You know, if Nehemiah were a boss, I would trust him because he's honest. He's a great leader, but secondly, he's honest about the failure. He owns it. He owns it. And he says, guys, but there must be a better way, and I want to find out. Unfortunately, he didn't see it because it didn't come till 400 years later. But he's pointing to something else. He's saying there might be something better, and you wonder, because Ezekiel's before Nehemiah, 150 years before, you have to wonder if he had in his mind this prophecy, where God promises to give the people a new heart and a new spirit. And the question is, how does this happen? How will God give the people a new heart and a new spirit? Well, it turns out Nehemiah was on the right track. Because Nehemiah tries to clean the temple, right? We saw that. He tries to clean the temple in Jerusalem. But 400 years later, Jesus enters the temple and does the exact same thing. He cleanses the temple of all the money changers. Remember, that happens in all four Gospels, which is significant because not many stories of Jesus are in all four, but this one is. But then Jesus, he takes it further and he says what? He says, I am the temple. He says, remember, you tear this temple down and in 3 days I will raise it back up. Remember he says that? And then he goes even further, and this is what he says. He said, I will make my people the temple by cleansing you with my blood, by which you are forgiven, which removes all impurity and unrighteousness. And then he will fill us with his presence, with his spirit, and make us the dwelling place of God. It's incredible. That's inside out. That's what Jesus came to do. We ourselves are the new temple. And then Nehemiah also tried to enforce the Sabbath rest, and the people break it again immediately. But then Jesus, 400 years later, says, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. I am the Lord of the Sabbath. You know what Jesus did more? The way he proved this was by doing something more than anything else on the Sabbath. You guys know what that was? What did he do more than anything else on the Sabbath? He healed. At least 11 separate times, there's separate accounts of Jesus healing explicitly, knowingly on the Sabbath. Do you think he was trying to make a point? To the chagrin of many of the leaders, obviously. And then he says, come to me, and I will give you rest for your souls, for I am gentle and humble in heart. Jesus is the true Sabbath. He is the one who heals our hearts and our bodies and gives us true rest for our tired and hurting souls. as our gentle and tender Savior. And lastly, Nehemiah fights intermarriage because Israel's holiness is at stake. They didn't want the influence of pagan nations through marriage. And 400 years later, Jesus leaves his Father's house, humbles himself by taking on flesh to become our bridegroom, to make us, his church, his bride. The church by purifying us with the truth of his word and filling us with his Spirit. It's all there. It's all there. And there is one more key difference between Nehemiah and Jesus, and it's this. You remember Nehemiah's parting words in 13. After everything falls apart, he cries out, God, in the moment of weakness, says, God, remember me for good. He is ultimately self-focused. But when Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, with death breathing down his neck, he says, Father, not my will, but yours. Not my will, but yours. And on the cross, he cries out, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Jesus Christ is the grace of God in our lives, made flesh. He reflects to us the heart of a gracious Father who loves us and is patient with us. And despite all our weakness and our brokenness and our sin, he delights in us. And there is joy on his face as he brings healing to our broken hearts. He's not like, oh, James, come on, man, again. He's like, yes, you're back. And to see that smile on his face as he tends to my wounds and your wounds. That is our Jesus. And when you begin to see that, you truly see that, which is a process, it will begin to melt your heart. I have a friend who I used to serve with at church a couple decades ago. Let's call him Bill. Bill is a talented guy. We served together for a few years. And as talented as Bill was, if things didn't go his way, which was more often than not, he would get angry, and not just angry, but very angry. And there would be times where he would blow up and take things out, especially on me. I happened to be one of the pastors, so he thought, hey, he could take it if anyone could take it. So I took it. Except for one time I didn't take it, but every other time I took it from this guy, from Bill. Well, several years ago, Bill calls me out of the blue and asks to meet for lunch, and so we meet up, and I was more surprised than anything because I thought Bill didn't like me, but I said yes, and so I'm bracing myself for this meeting. And over lunch, Bill begins to share with me that he's in a Christian 12-step program for anger. And he's been learning and accepting a lot about himself through this program. And he shared that for most of his life, he was afraid that if things didn't go exactly his way, that it would reflect poorly on him, and that eventually he would be rejected by others, and that everything would just fall apart. Something he had experienced time and time again as a young boy, growing up with his father who was physically abusive. He carried deep father wounds. He lived with this fear of rejection every single day of his life. And anger was how he dealt with the fear. Do you guys know that anger is a secondary emotion? You're angry about something else, about another feeling you're feeling, which is usually fear, actually. It's a response emotion. It's a secondary emotion, as psychologists call it. And so most of his life, he was determined to make sure that everything in his life went his way. And he became increasingly controlling of people and circumstances and anxious. And can you imagine the insecurity? And it would get to the point where if someone laughed around him, he would automatically assume they were laughing at him. And he would get angry. And he shared that things had gone to the point where it was unmanageable. He was losing his job, his kids, and his marriage. And everything was going sideways. And so in his desperation, he found this program, and he faced what turned out to be incredible pain in his life. The The pain of rejection by his father, the pain of rejection by friends. And what helped him get through, he told me, through this process, this season, was the gentle and humble acceptance of fellow believers he experienced each and every meeting. He shared that every meeting he was afraid that people would finally be fed up with his antics and his anger, but they never did. And he had this sponsor who a sponsor, someone who tracks with you and guides you down the path that they themselves have already traveled. If you're an AA, an alcoholic, another alcoholic becomes your sponsor. Well, he had a sponsor, and he had a few minor blow-ups with the sponsor. And every time he met with him, he was afraid that this would be the time that his sponsor would say, "Hey, this is it. I'm done with you." But he never did. He never did. Bill is in a completely different place today because of the gentle and patient presence of other believers in his life. And he's still working through things, part of which is reconciling with people he's hurt. And that's what he was doing with me. It was a step, right, is to meet with people that you need to make amends with and reconcile with. And he was doing that with me. He was asking for forgiveness. It's a long journey. But what I learned that day is that external structures, because that's what 12-step is, that's what AA is, and that's what, I think there's a Gamblers Anonymous meeting that meets in this very building on Thursday nights. All these meetings, these groups, they are external structures, but they are only valuable to the degree that they point us to the internal. Does that make sense? It's only valuable to the point that they point to the internal. The 12-step program does that. As he surrendered to the process, the program forced him to confront and deal with the internal pain, the things he was carrying in his heart. And that led to real healing of relationships and ultimately his wounds. Groups, though they're structured, they have that potential. Certain relationships have that potential. Restorative groups here at Beacon, like Divorce Care and Mending the Soul and even Alpha, they all have that potential. They're external structures, but they have to point inward into the heart. It's the same with any discipline. Any discipline that you do, if it's Bible reading and you're just flipping pages, okay, you're in the Bible, it's better than nothing. I don't know, maybe that's worse actually. That could be a debate. Like if you're just flipping pages in the Bible and you're checking off a box, is that better than not spending time in the Word at all? I don't know, to be honest, because I get proud when I do that enough. Yeah, I read the Bible in a year. But I was reading a resume. It's got to point in. Rules like no buying on Sundays, that's the other hand. These are behaviors that focus on external actions, and that may work for a while. And some of them serve a purpose, like don't go 80 around this bend, right? You're going to go off the cliff. You probably shouldn't do that. But they have very little healing impact on the heart, is what I'm trying to say. Beloved, God is not after our good behavior. He's after our hearts. Because he knows that when he has our hearts, he has everything. And the scripture says it. From the heart, everything, the life, is the wellspring of life. And for many of us, we are frantic in our control of everything outside us. Right? Every external aspect of our lives, it's like a literal fight. We are fighting every day, and I get it. I'm there with you. I'm trying to control things that I should have no control over, like how my kid's mood. And I'm like, why are you in a bad mood? Be happy. I'm like, what? That makes no sense, James. That makes no sense. Why are you telling him to be happy? But that's what I do. I'm trying to control everything. And it's a literal fight. But I believe the Lord in the busyness of this season, and we're in a busy season here, guys. He wants to remind us that there is a better way, and that is to surrender to his gentle and humble friendship and lordship over our lives, to abide in his joy-filled heart. I know that just sounds like words, but when you do it, you know it's the difference between reading a resume and spending time in the car in the freezing rain, huddled in sleeping bags, which is what I did with my wife before we got married. And you just love being there because you're hearing everything. You're feeling their heart. You're seeing. You know, there's this moment right before the Israelites cross over the Red Sea. They're pinned between the advancing Egyptians and the cold waters of the sea. And they are scared, and they are like, we shouldn't be here. We should have gone back. And it's in this moment of their greatest weakness and vulnerability, their tiredness, Moses says this to them, Exodus 14. He looks at the people and says, do not be afraid. Stand firm and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Do you know what happens when you're still? I actually don't know because I'm not very still very often. There's only one way to find out. It's just to do it. And that's the invitation today. I don't know what fight you're fighting, what thing you're trying to control, what future you're trying to make happen. The Lord says, I'm fighting for you. I've been fighting for you. And all you need to do is be still. To know my heart. I'll invite you to do that with me. If you could close your eyes. Father, we're not still. We are fighting. We are fighting tooth and nail, it seems like every single day of our lives. We're fighting for more of this, more of that, more information, more in the know, more entertainment, more money, more this, more love, more power. God, I just want to say I'm tired. We're tired. Would you forgive us for the ways in which we have given ourselves to the fight? And we want to hear from you today, Lord. We want to be like those people at the sea, feeling pinned, to know that you, our God, are fighting for us. You are fighting for us. Help us to see you, to know that we can be still before you, God. Help us to see your hand on our lives. I just want to invite you, just take a moment, maybe a minute. It's a long time, but take a minute. Just to be still before him. If you could just point your heart's eye, your mind's eye to his face. Just receive for him whatever he has for you this afternoon. Father, thank you that you are in the silence. We can meet you right here in the silence. Thank you that wherever we go, you are with us. You will never leave us or forsake us, your word says. We pray this week that you would show us, remind us of the invitation to meet you in this place once again. Help us to create this space for you. I pray as we meet with you that you would give rest to our tired and weary souls. Remind us of the tenderness of your heart, the love in your eyes, the joy on your face as you bring healing to our hearts. Thank you for being humble and gentle in spirit, God. We love you. All God's people said.